the Treaty of Versailles to ratify or reject. Our big essential question today is, should the United States have ratified or rejected the Treaty of Versailles? This video will look at sections 1, 2, and 3. So section 1, very brief, looks at the introduction. Woodrow Wilson going to Paris, France, being welcomed by all these Parisians, over 2 million Parisians and Europeans excited to see Wilson with all their fun little nicknames in terms of viewing Wilson as this savior of humanity and theoretically going to bring this just and lasting peace. So section 2 focuses on Wilson's vision, what are called his 14 points. These are his main points that he's going to be presenting to the other major powers that are attending the Treaty of Versailles. Overall goal, Wilson wants to protect every peace-loving nation and peoples from force and selfish aggression. So there are 3 major goals that you guys need to be aware of in his 14 points. The first goal of his is to eliminate the causes of war. Another way to think about this is those main ingredients. What were the main reasons why World War I started? Some of his early points are going to be the end of secret agreements and alliances like we saw after Franz Ferdinand's assassination, doing away with those alliances. Freedom of the seas, a big reason why the United States was ultimately pulled into World War I. Think Lusitania, Sussex, avoiding those types of encounters. And then the last big goal of one of his is going to be the reduction of armaments, reducing the amount of weapons in production. Again, something Germany had done as they were hoping to catch up in the colonization game. And as Germany begins to rearm, other nations follow suit. Second big goal of his, self-determination for ethnic groups. So his vision is to let ethnic groups control their own political future. So places like Austria-Hungary, Ottoman empires, now that they are falling apart, the notion is to give these different ethnic groups in these empires the ability to form their own nations, let them govern themselves, choose the forms of governance that they see best fitting for them. Goal 3 is to create an international organization to ensure world peace. And this is considered his 14th point, which includes what's called the League of Nations. This is an international body, many countries, all part of this international organization to theoretically preserve peace around the world. Think modern day United Nations. So again, League of Nations, the goal, protect one another's independence and territorial integrity. That's in bold. Going a little further here, simply meaning nations respecting one another's borders and don't try to gain another country's territory by force, respecting boundaries, those types of things. The notion is the League of Nations then would help resolve conflicts before they escalate into large-scale wars. So, thinking again, the spark of World War I, a minor conflict in Eastern Europe, getting the international organization of many countries involved would theoretically then help figure out what is the best way to handle the situation, again, to avoid it escalating into a major all-out war. Wilson breaks from tradition. He does a couple of things that will come back to haunt him. First thing, he asks Americans to show support for his 14 points, his peace plan, by keeping Democrats in office in the 1918 election. There was a midterm election that was coming up. He asked the American public to show support with his 14 points and to vote Democrats into office. And this backfires. Republicans win majority in both the House and the Senate. Now, why is that a big issue? That very much weakens his position as the leader going into the Treaty of Versailles. So he no longer now commands the legislative majority at home, meaning he has the opposition political party to theoretically win over in order to approve whatever ends up coming out of the Treaty of Versailles. And again, his plans as a Democrat are going to be very different than theoretically what a Republican might want, especially when it comes to his idea of the League of Nations. And so as a result, these other big leaders at this point in time, they know that he doesn't have the support of those folks in Washington, and it makes him come across as a diminished or weak leader, as they know now that he has a lot of work to do to convince over the Republicans that control, again, the Senate and the House. The other issue that Wilson's going to have is he brings a delegation with him to the peace conference, other politicians. He shoots himself in the foot, though, by only bringing one Republican. We talk partisanship. Like today, Republicans and Democrats have super strong rivalries. Same thing back in the day with Woodrow Wilson. And as a result, then, the Republican leaders really don't have confidence in these individuals who are representing America over in France. And so, again, it will make it difficult then for Woodrow Wilson to get his finished Treaty of Versailles plan approved here back in the States. Section 3 really just focusing in on what the Europeans were looking to have accomplished. The Treaty of Versailles, again, is going to include the Big Four, Woodrow Wilson of the U.S., and you have Great Britain, France, and Italy, who are all invited to hammer out this deal. They meet at the Palace of Versailles to work out the terms. The one unique thing being Germany not being present, obviously making it very difficult for Germany then to get their wishes and desires spoken for, and making it much easier for these other major powers to really create some tough deals for the Germans in the framework of it. So these European leaders, again, they want to protect their interest of their own countries. They've been beaten, they've been battered from World War I. France, their goal is security through a weakened Germany, sharing a border with Germany. Their goal is they want to see the size of that German military that had been built up. They want to reduce the size and avoid the threat of ever being invaded. And they also want Germany to give up a region that's called the Saar Valley. It was a coal-rich, industrial-rich area. Give that up to the French as well. Britain wants Germany to accept responsibility for World War I. They demand what is called the War Guilt Clause, and this really ends the hope for peace without victory, something Wilson had been hoping to gain when he goes over to France. War Guilt Clause is basically putting the blame entirely on the German state for the outcome of World War I, very much creating this winner and loser. Someone has to take the brunt. Someone has to, take responsibility. That responsibility then comes in the form of reparations, money owed. The Germans having to pay $33 billion as a result of World War I. Again, Wilson, he's trying to restrain the efforts at punishing Germany. He's concerned that this is going to lead to future problems. And he's right. We're going to have World War II a couple of decades later. Now, why does Wilson accept it? Well, Europeans, they lost, millions and millions of lives. America arrives late in the game in World War I, few casualties, and the Europeans are saying, look, we paid the biggest price. And the other part of it too, for sure, is going to be the fact that especially Britain, they had taken out major amounts of loans. They had used those loans to buy weapons from American industry. They owe America massive amounts of money, hence the need for reparations. If we don't get reparations, your banks, your industries, they don't get that money back from us. With regards to self-determination, kind of a mixed bag here. You do see some new nations being formed. Some ethnic groups do get, their independence. Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Think all Eastern Europe. Eastern European nations will gain their independence. But with regards to some of those colonial parts of Germany, much of that's just going to change hands and go to these other European nations like France and Great Britain. And again, there's really no regards to the interests of the people living there, something that was disappointing for these individuals who had heard Wilson talking the ideas of self-determination. So again, these former colonies, these German colonies, they will now become mandates, which meaning that they will be controlled by the League of Nations, these other France, Great Britain, these other major powers, until they are ready for self-rule. So, thinking like the Philippines when McKinley felt that the Filipinos were not ready for self-rule. America governs, creates a military government, controls, and then ultimately gives them their independence at a later date. That is the notion. So places like China, Pacific, Africa, all of these other areas, especially the Middle East, you have borders redrawn up. that are going to create conflict with different rival ethnic groups in that region, but again, changing hands to these other European powers. So again, kind of a mixed results with regards to self-determination. This map here, again, looking at Eastern Europe, these countries here, more countries, you have a lot more countries being created after World War I. But again, these Middle Eastern, Africa, Asia, those areas just simply switching from German control to French and British control. League of Nations, that is approved. Again, that is his, for Wilson, his most important point, that 14th point. His hope is he's going to accept the Treaty of Versailles with the idea that theoretically the League of Nations then would help solve the future problems that he sees coming up. You know, he realizes Germany is really going to be injured from this agreement, and his hope is that the League of Nations then would solve those future issues. One thing you guys are going to have to be comfortable with, collective security is super important to understand with League of Nations. Collective security simply means commitment by many countries to join together to deal with a nation that threatens peace. So think, if France were to be attacked, all countries that are a part of the League of Nations are required to aid France without getting any sort of approval from their home country. It's an immediate demand that if a country that's part of the League of Nations is attacked, all other countries must come to their aid. And for Americans, especially Senate Republicans, and you're going to be reading about this, that's a concern because Congress is the one that has the right to declare war. Now, this is saying that this international organization supersedes what Congress does or does not agree to what is, worthy of declaring war. Again, you guys are going to read more about how that creates issues here stateside. So Big Four, they signed the Treaty of Versailles, ending World War I. Now Wilson's going to have the task of bringing it back to the stateside and getting that Senate approval. That will be very difficult. So overall, again, June 28th, 1919, Treaty of Versailles is signed in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles. Big takeaway, harsh treatment of the Germans, upsetting many people. This quote basically saying that you have a new order that merely fouled the old order. This new order is basically creating revenge and hatred, much like this political cartoon you see here showing the Hitler Party giving Hitler the ammunition, the revenge factor that's going to allow some of these countries to want to seek revenge from Britain, France, and these other victors from World War I. So again, Treaty of Versailles, hatred, vengeance, horrible things like that. Wilson, he is very much giving up many of his 14 points that he hoped to pass. But again, his thing is at least he got his League of Nations. Now, 14 points are his main themes. He has about 23 ideas that he brought out there. 4 of those are technically honored. Again, that League of Nations is so important. But again, you have a very sad face, Wilson, unhappy about the outcome. But for him, the Treaty of Versailles, at least it's more fair than if he hadn't been there. At least he's going to get his League of Nations to deal with future problems. So again, that covers sections 1 through 3. I'll have another video for you guys that'll cover sections 4 and 5 as Wilson then faced the task of trying to get this passed and ultimately what is the outcome? Does the United States, does the Senate, does the House, do they approve the Treaty of Versailles? That's going to be the main issue that you guys are going to be looking at. So again, I'll have another video here, a link for you to watch.